Now this question is an acids and bases question. To solve this question is actually a very tedious process that requires knowledge of a few concepts. However, there's a shortcut to solving this question. So what I'll do is I'll go through the tedious process to derive the answer first, and then after that I'll review to you what is the shortcut. Now, as mentioned, there are a few concepts that we need to revise before we answer. So we'll go through the concepts one by one. Now, the very tell you that there's an acid, phosphorus acid, and they tell you that it's a dibasic acid. So the first concept that we need to revise is what is a dibasic acid. When we were discussing acids, we came across this term called basicity. Essentially, it tells us how many units of hydrogen ions can we get from 1 unit of the acid. So if 1 unit of the acid produces 1 unit of hydrogen ions, we call it monobasic. If 1 unit of the acid produces 2 units of hydrogen ions, we call it dibasic acid. An example of a dibasic acid would be sulfuric acid. Now, when students first see this question, they may find it slightly weird that phosphorus acid is a dibasic acid. Now, why is that so? It's because when you look at the formula of phosphorus acid, there are 3 hydrogen ions. However, while it's more often than not that all hydrogen atoms in the formula are capable of forming ions, alright, but it's not always the case. So in this case, since the question tells you that phosphorus acid is a dibasic acid, it means that in phosphorus acid, only 2 out of 3 hydrogen atoms are capable of forming ions. Okay, so the overall equation will look something like this. H3PO3, only 2 of the hydrogen atoms can form ions, so the remaining anion would have a formula of this. Okay, so that's the first concept that we need to revise. The second concept that we need to revise is this, that when you have a dibasic acid, meaning 1 unit of the acid produces 2 units of hydrogen ions, the concept that we need to know is this, that the dibasic acid will dissociate stepwise. Okay, what it means by stepwise is that the hydrogen ions, since there are 2 hydrogen ions to be formed, the dissociation will take place one at a time. So meaning there will be 2 reactions that happens in the dissociation of phosphorus acid. In the first reaction, phosphorus acid will produce one of the hydrogen atoms will dissociate to form an ion. Okay, so after removing the hydrogen ion, what is left would have 1 less hydrogen. And since we have removed something of positive charge, 1 positive charge, the remaining part would have a charge of 1 negative. Okay, and since phosphorus acid is dibasic, the anion that is formed, H2PO3 minus, can undergo a second reaction where it releases a second hydrogen ion, and then the remaining fragment would have one further less hydrogen. And again, after removing another positive charge from H2PO3 minus, the remaining fragment would gain another unit of negative charge. Okay, so the concept to learn or to recall here is that when you have a dibasic acid, the dissociation actually takes place stepwise, meaning it releases 1 hydrogen ion at a time. Now, the significance of this is that in the dissociation of a dibasic acid or in a solution of a dibasic acid, it is possible to find 2 different anions. Okay, it will be this H2PO3 minus, and the second anion that can be found in solution will be HPO3 2 minus. Okay, so that leads us to the final concept that we need to revise is this. In this question, they tell you that phosphorus acid is reacted with sodium hydroxide and they want to find what is the possible salt form. Alright, in lessons we have learned that salts are ionic compounds. They are made up of a cation and an anion. We went on to further learn that the cation would come from your base, your alkali or your carbonate. So in this case it is Na+, and your anion would come from your acid. So if your acid is a dibasic acid, there are actually two possible anions that can be formed. As mentioned, it would be H2PO3- or HPO32-. Now, as a result, there will be two possible salts that can form as well. All right, you can pair sodium with H2PO3. You can pair sodium with HPO32-, in which you will get two different salts. Okay, so one of the salt that you will get, or rather, how do we find the formula of the salt? We need to revise our writing of chemical formula. So in this case, when we look at the first pair, when you combine Na+ with H2PO3-, do the charges cancel out? The answer is yes. So the salt that is formed is just NaH2PO3. In the second case, when Na+ combines with HPO32-, you find that the charges do not cancel out. So now you must find a way to make sure that the charges cancel out. And I hope by now you'll find it's straightforward that you will need two sodium ions to be paired with HPO32-. Alright, as a result, because of the stepwise ionization of the dibasic acid, you will end up with two different anions and you will get two different salts when you react with an alkali. Okay, so if you look at the salts that are formed, the correct answer would be C. So as mentioned, to solve this question is very, very tedious. Now, how do we solve this very, very quickly, or what is the hack? Is to recognize this, that when you have a monobasic acid, alright, monobasic acid, there will be one possible anion, okay, only one, which will give you only one possible salt. Okay, when you have a dibasic acid, it will ionize stepwise, which gives rise to two different anions, and on reaction will give you two different salts. Similarly, if you have a tribasic acid, it will ionize stepwise to give you three possible anions, and as a result, you will get three different salts. Okay, so from there you can spot this pattern that the number of possible salts is related to the basicity. And since in this question we are looking at a dibasic salt, we would know that there are two possible salts that can be formed, and from the options, only one of them contains two possible salts. So that must be the correct answer. Okay, having said that, if I were to change the question to a tribasic acid, all right, then there will be three possible salts, and then the correct answer then would be D.